Imagine a world where you knew that you mattered and you belonged. The people cared about you because we were so darn good at listening to one another, no matter how different we are. That is what Sidewalk Talk is doing by putting listeners on sidewalks all over the world so that we can practice the art of connecting. Join me, founder and director Traci as I interview experts on the fine art of human connection and interview some of our volunteers who've been listening on the sidewalk and even some of the folks that we've listened to. And if you want to volunteer, consider joining us at sidewalk-talk.org. So, Dr. Elliot Gann is better known as Philip Drummond, the DJ. I remember meeting Elliot years ago. We were at a workshop at the Psychoanalytic Institute in San Francisco, and he shared that he does beat making with inner city kids to not only help their mental health, but to also sort of promote STEM learning. And this was a particular group of teachers that were really against hip hop. And he and I bonded through a mutual smirk across the room. So Elliot's a clinical psychotherapist. He's a producer. He's a beat maker. He joined Today's Future Sound to apply his expertise in psychology to transform the organization to what it is today. He's the executive director of Today's Future Sound, and he's taught and presented beat making and music production to over 8,000 students around the world for real, including North and South America, Africa, Asia, and Australia, and my own kids. Moreover, Elliot brought his beat-making equipment twice out to the sidewalk with me, and one of which we shot on video, and it went viral. So it was the first viral video on Sidewalk Talk. So we have Elliot to thank for the growth of Sidewalk Talk. So I'm excited for you to learn about his project and the really cool and unique way that he works with young people. Elliot Gann, Today's Future Sound. Dr. Elliot Gann, I get a little anxious before I talk to people for the Sidewalk Talk podcast. I actually wasn't anxious at all, which was such a relief to get to talk with you today because I feel like you're an old friend.
I'm a little anxious, but hey. Yeah.
No, really? Do you get anxious?
I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. I'm kind of, jumping into the void here. I didn't know exactly what I would talk about. So, a little pressure, but no, I'm good. I'm good.
So, what folks don't know, we should probably turn off our video so that we have really good sound quality. But what I wanted to say, because I can see your video and I want to name the visual that I'm seeing. You are in a sound recording studio right now.
Yeah. I got like thousands of records and beat machines and keyboards behind me.
It's like crazy. You look like this badass professional musician because you kind of are.
Sometimes I kind of am.
So I'm going to give everyone context because there's a big context. I met Dr. Elliot Gann because if you met him, he so doesn't like play up his doctorness, but he's Dr.
I'm
Elliot
glad you think so. Thank you.
I met him at a psychoanalytic talk on a Saturday at a preschool. And he got up and talked about how he brings beats and music making to inner city youth as part of the way that he helps well-being and science and math learning. And you kind of got a little bit of a sideways glance because this was not necessarily the kind of school that believes in electronic music. And so I felt an affinity
Waldorf,
to you.
Not feeling it.
Immediately.
Which is ironic, but maybe not.
And then years later, I don't know how our paths crossed again.
I saw you had a Facebook ad, and I said you had something about like an activism or something newsletter, or you had the magazine, and I sent you a message on there.
That's oh yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And then I said, wait a minute, I know you. Are you this guy? And you said, yes, I am.
Yeah, that's me.
And so you're hustling. You work your buns off serving the community all the time. And I kind of
feel a kindred spirit in you. And so whenever I feel like I want to cry because I've, worked 12 hours on a particular day supporting Sidewalk Talk, I'm like, I bet Elliot did the same thing today. So it's all right. Keep going. What do you do? What's this call? Tell me, there's got to be a big, deep reason if you're going to put in that much time and effort and not pay yourself a ton of money.
Yeah. And, okay. What's the reason? Yeah. It's passion driven. It's purpose driven. It's really, I do the work that I do and have been developing this therapeutic beat making model and using hip hop and music and beat making and those kinds of things to engage and work with youth and also older folks, because it speaks to my passion. It's a combination of my passion for mental health and social justice and community building and purposeful like living, and then also my passion for hip hop music and culture and electronic music and beat making, all of those cultures, because there's a lot of overlap there, especially because hip hop came from a place of empowerment and healing for Black and brown folks, for African American and Afro Latino folks, who were totally disenfranchised in the 1960s and 70s in the South Bronx, and it came out of a lot of trauma and violent conflict, and the young people decided they needed to stop infighting and hurting each other and hurting themselves, and really come together and build community and heal and express themselves in a positive way. So the therapeutic aspects and the educational aspects and the empowerment and sociopolitical, all that stuff is baked into hip hop culture already. I've just really been trying to take a specific part of it in terms of beat making and advocate for its therapeutic and educational uses, and speak to, I think, what a lot of folks like myself who are beat makers, who are DJs, who are practitioners of hip hop music and culture know intuitively, and maybe in a common sense kind of way that someone hasn't put formal language to, or studied in a scientific way. And so that drives me and my passion to connect and to reach young people. Yeah, and something interesting happened to me last night, actually, and it's been happening a little more lately. I had two former students who we had taught in 4th or 5th grade 6 years ago reach out to us on Instagram, to the Today's Future Sound Instagram, and to my artist profile, and say, wow, like I remember this, and this was such a good experience, and thank you so much, and wanted to say hi. And I had that happen with another student who we'd taught in middle school around that time, and I ran into him. He'd sent us a message through our website, but hadn't given an email address or a contact where we could get back to him. And I was really kind of sad about that, because I wanted to talk to him. And lo and behold, I was in West Oakland, and who I see down the street, who I hear yelling me down the street, it's Bernard. And so I talked to him, and he's still doing music stuff and doing video stuff and media arts kind of thing. And he had said in his message, I miss y'all. I was looking back at the album that we made, because we always give them these kind of transitional objects, these the album covers or the CDs that really encapsulate the experience and remind them and give them a tangible, concrete outcome. And that's part of our model. And he said, man, I was looking to the music and I was remembering how much fun it was and how much I loved it, and missing you, and thinking about what essentially all these kids were saying. Now that they're not kids anymore, they're adolescents or young adults, are saying this really had an important impact on me. And so those kinds of things as well really remind me why I do what I do, because I get lost often in the administrative work, as you were alluding to. When you do 12 hours of admin work and emailing and texting and trying to get things done and meet deadlines and do this and that, and then the human part of it and the profound connection that we can form through these kinds of interventions or projects or initiatives, that happens every so often. Or I attempt to take a breath and reflect on what I'm doing. But it's really when you do it in the moment too, when I'm teaching or when I'm working with young folks, or when I take a moment to reflect, I think about, this is really important work that we're doing. And even though I say it's impactful, and I know that on an intellectual level, the important moments when people say thank you or say this really impacted me remind me why I do and why we do what we do. And reminds me also of how impactful these kinds of moments were to me when I was a child or when I was an adolescent. and someone took the time to do this. And that's why our slogan is, I wish I had this when I was a kid. And we have a whole little, illustrated, like cartoon illustration design of that, like stickers and sweatshirts and t-shirts. And we have nearly sold out of them because people love that sticker, because it really does speak to that kind of intergenerational mentorship that happens in hip hop, but the importance of, I think, feeling seen and heard, and being able to, to kind of have this self-realization that maybe is facilitated by, whether it be a therapist or a mentor or a parent or a teacher or a coach or whatever, just these mentors and people who are really important in our lives. And so we are trying to deliver that experience and reproduce that experience for the young folks that we work with, and for communities. And it doesn't have to be limited to youth. I'm really interested, and we're really interested in working with veterans, with adult, populations that may be in, inpatient clinics or in prisons and these kinds of things. But really to give back what we've received, and to share our passions, and to hopefully ignite those passions, or help folks find their passion, or, existential purpose, passions, hobbies, experience fun, experience a sense of autonomy and control, especially if you've been affected by trauma, where you lose control of yourself and or your surroundings, and it becomes a very scary and threatening environment. To give someone a sense of autonomy and control back, even in really little ways, is important, I think.
Well, so let me back up here a little bit and give a context for our listeners. Let's say that I'm a 15-year-old girl and I'm in West Oakland. How do I come in contact with today's future sound? And what are you hoping I experience with TFS?
So we work in elementary, middle, and high schools. We work in juvenile detention settings. We work in community settings. As and as we did that one day at 14th and Broadway in downtown Oakland, we set up in the middle of the street. And that was one way that someone could have encountered us, right? Just when we did that really fun kind of sidewalk talk in Today's Future Sound collab. But typically they would find us in after school or in school programs. Some youth might find us in juvenile hall. We've now just gotten a $30,000 grant from the California Arts Council to expand our juvenile hall program, which was only in one of the max security units. Now we're in the girls unit. And I think that's really important too, that girls and young women be able to receive these services and have access to and are encouraged to make beats. So it may be a school setting, it may be a community setting, it may be a juvenile hall setting. And I hope that at the very least, anyone who participates in our program discovers a new part of themselves and a new capacity, or develops a skill set, and can discover or further develop their artistic identity. The fact that a lot of people are told maybe that they're not good at art or music, or they think they're not, but that given the tools and the framework and even the relationships to facilitate that, they can do that, and they can discover they can do it. And I think that contributes, as part of the kind of therapeutic beat making model that I've been pushing and talking about. There's three parts, right? And so when someone comes in, it's how is beat making or hip hop, how can that be therapeutic? I say, well, there's first of all the relationship and the immediacy of the equipment that we use, the technology that we use to teach people to make beats enables near instant gratification. And you can make something that sounds good in a very short amount of time. And that's really
you had
important.
My kid hooked.
Yeah, right.
He has a beat making thing because of you.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that it impacted him that way. And that's really the idea, that we're engaging immediately. And we know that the relationship is the number one predictor of positive therapeutic outcome across all theoretical orientations, right? So the most important thing, right? I mean, that's what it is. And any teacher or administrator or coach or people who, they know that, right? It's not just in therapy. You can't have effective education without relationships. And that means you also have to be culturally and developmentally responsive, understand where people are coming from, and be adaptable. So I think that's really important. And we have found across cultures, language barriers, geographic areas, we've taught on 6 continents now across 20 some odd countries, that the equipment really it's visual, it's kinesthetic, it's bodily, use your body to touch stuff, touch the lights that light up, and it creates sound. And so it's this multisensory experience that's really engaging. People want to just press the buttons and see what happens. And we let them do that. We encourage them to do that. So we can establish a relationship both through that as well as through the, the culture of hip hop, electronic music, popular music. And we facilitate young folks and old folks alike to make that if they want to. Whatever kind of music you want to make, you can do that. So we have the relationship, right? And then there's the kind of what I talk about is the expressive dimension or domain, where you both have this idea of catharsis and having a release of stress, of built up aggression and tension and whatever it is that's bothering you through the activity of music. And this is Freud's idea of catharsis. But also, if you look at the research on kind of both trauma and neurophysiology, we see that repetitive rhythms put people into mild trance-like states, and they can put people into deep trance-like states too, depending on the person and how they're wired. But we know we can change brainwave patterns through repetitive beats. Some people it takes a minute, some people it takes 3, some people 10. Now we know you can do that through traditional drumming and with djembes and congas and things like that, West African drums. But we argue kind of by extension that you can do the same thing with tapping pads and with actually listening to beats, hip hop beats. And there's a whole thing in hip hop culture where folks talk about getting open, how they had this kind of transcendental experience and really kind of go into this flow state. And I think it's not a coincidence that people talk about, when you're freestyling and it's coming out to you and you're going through this free associative process, talking about flow and your rapping. So there's also that aspect of it. And I think that's really therapeutic and can really calm people down if they're anxious, if they're having a stress, trauma or stress response and starting to dissociate. You can ground them in the present moment and they don't get caught in the past of the trauma. And then even connect with other people to a single beat, right? We know that's really powerful. That's why it's used in, traditional and ancient cultures and religion. And it's really powerful to join with people in a group rhythmic activity. And that's one of the things that I've talked with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk about, who's one of the world experts on trauma. He talks about how important that is to have synchronized rhythmic exercises to sync people. And Bruce Perry talks about how, rhythm is the central feature of the nervous system that ties everything together. And I've talked with him also about, our kind of therapeutic beat making model. So
just please keep geeking out with me because it's
okay.
I mean,
I can nerd out for hours.
Yeah, this is awesome. Keep going.
So we have the relationship. We have what I call the expressive domain, which includes the kind of the neurophysiological regulation, the kind of the catharsis, and then the third domain or dimension that I talk about in the therapeutic beat making model is self-concept. And self-concept encapsulates both self-esteem, how do we view ourselves in comparison to our ideal sense of self, right? And Freud said we have this ideal sense of self, this fantastic idea that we'll never reach, but has a certain set of I'm going to be the best beat maker and an incredible athlete and a great person and brush my teeth and floss every night. And the closer we get to doing that, if we wash the dishes, we do a good job, we do something nice for someone, we're rewarded by our superego and we feel better about ourselves because we've come closer to our ideal sense of self. But simultaneously, and so, you teach someone how to make beats or master, this equipment, and they make a song they're really proud of and share it and get good feedback from their community or friends. I think that it helps with this, the self-esteem and feeling good about yourself, but also included in the self-concept, the way we're operationalizing it is self-efficacy, the idea of having an effect, an agency, having an effect on the world. And when you've been exposed to trauma, when you've been put in a position where you felt powerless or out of control, it's really important to have that, to help with recovery, to help with a sense of that you can control your life. And, I often have moments myself frequently where I feel like things are out of control and I have to do some, breathing or, some meditation or whatever to kind of regain a sense of control.
Some more beat making.
That's exactly right. Therapeutic beat making. I had a friend who was, who was experiencing a lot of anxiety, was even suicidal. And he told me, he said, look, it really helps doing the beat making. It really calmed me down. And I think it does. That's one of the reasons why we do it. But when you create this sense of mastery and really kind of develop your skills, I believe it gives folks a sense of mastery. And that's why, to me, it's important to even ask a child or a person, we have 5 kick drums you can choose from. This pad, you hit this button, it'll do this one. You hit this button. Which one would you like? Because so often we're not asked, and kids are not asked in school, what would you like to do?
Yeah.
No, they're told no, no, no. And we're trying to say yes, yes, yes. You have a choice. You matter. We're going to give you the choice instead of my just telling you what to do, and figure out who are you. And I think that that contributes to a sense of efficacy. And that really is kind of central to, along with the esteem part, the self-concept. And so I think that's just very important for folks who may feel they don't have agency, feel that people don't care about their voice. And it's important that everyone feel seen and heard and understood.
So as I listen to you, I'm putting this into my Traci simplified language. That, the thing that we share is this relational piece, but I'm hearing you say, look, there's the capacity to express, there's a capacity to soothe, and there's a capacity to feel empowered.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That just taking it out of some of the psychological language, and that you bring that both into the relationship, because in a way, this device, this equipment becomes the translator.
Yeah, it's a vessel. Yeah, absolutely.
And
it's a tool. Yeah.
And it allows for all of those things to happen and potentially then deepen the human relationships that are there, because you're also, getting a chance to talk to more of you artists and learning so much in the process from you all about the co-creation process is so connective, and it's so different than just having a conversation. It's another kind of conversation that's so deep and it sounds so rich, the kinds of musical hip hop conversations that you're having with the folks that you're serving.
Yeah, and especially because it's collaborative. There's a lot of, soft skills or, interpersonal aspects to it in terms of negotiating things and being respectful of someone else's opinion, or, I don't know, aesthetic choice, or the amount of space that they need. So it's a balancing act, as most interpersonal interactions are. But then with the artistic piece, which can even complicate things, but it can also really bring things together nicely too. And you see the thing that I've seen, I was going to say, you see the gratification. What I've seen happen thousands of times in teaching, tens of thousands of people to make beats, and watching our instructors, is those eureka moments, and those paradigm shifts, the kind of epiphanies where you show someone the component parts to say, okay, you want to program the drum beat that you've heard in hip hop or popular songs. Here are the individual sounds you put together, and it creates this gestalt, this bigger, what is it? I always get the cliche wrong about the sum is greater than
the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
That's exactly right. And I've seen this happen so many times when you hit play and the little drum pieces have been put together to build a rhythm, and it creates that drum beat that they've heard before, or you add on the samples or the musical components, and they're like, oh, wow, like that sounds like what I've heard on the radio, or that sounds really good, and oh, that's how they do it. And it's a beautiful moment from a learning and developmental perspective, and the pride that they take, it's just a really fundamentally important thing. And I think a lot of us have had that, not only in musical experiences, but in other kinds of things where you have the moment of clarity, you have a moment of understanding, where everything kind of comes together, or you feel really good about what you've done. And hopefully that's the kind of thing that we also develop in psychotherapy, or in counseling, or in talking with folks and personal development, that you start to maybe have more of those, where you understand how things fit together, or why things are the way they are. Maybe you learn more about yourself as a person, and kind of put the pieces together.
So I'm 15 years old. I found my way to today's Future Sound. Parents are divorcing. How much time do I get to spend with y'all? And where am I? Am I having a recurring class at my school? And am I getting to produce a piece of music? And do you actually do some therapy with me?
So we don't do therapy proper. What we're doing is therapeutic. It's helping with positive youth development, or with development. Now you can have therapeutic moments or interactions that are therapeutic, I do believe.
Because I just want to interrupt you to say to our audience that I joked that Elliot is a doctor, and he's a doctor of psychology. So that's why I was asking that. So keep going.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and my license is active in the state of California. So I could conduct traditional psychotherapy, but I focus my efforts on running Today's Future Sound. And so we meet this 15-year-old. They're going to see us usually probably once a week, maybe for 15 weeks, maybe for 30 weeks, hopefully. The more the better, but it's difficult to get more than once a week. But we have some programs, mainly at this point, our juvenile hall program, where some of the units get to be seen twice a week. So you're interfacing with our instructors. Usually it's a 3-to-1 ratio of students to instructor. It can vary. And you're having an adult mentor who cares about you, who's non-coercive, who is interested in what you're interested in and interested in helping you develop as an artist and a person, and is taking the time to do that. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Again, because in
Yeah.
schools often, not always, but often, people are told what to do or what to learn. And more and more they're encouraging critical thinking and reflection, but it really varies. And still, even, I think the ratio of students to teachers makes things more difficult. So you have, maybe you had a really tough day, and maybe you're acting it out in your behavior. Maybe you're grumpy or you're lashing out at people, but hopefully you're able to say, come to the the beat making class group, channel those feelings into the music. Maybe you've established enough of a relationship with this teaching artist who's different from a normal teacher, and yes, they're an authority figure, but they have kind of more cultural capital or cachet. It's really an opportunity for you to connect with them, to maybe you tell them what's going on. I mean, I had a kid that I worked with 7 years ago, who just really clicked. He loved the beat making, and he and I just kind of clicked, and the relationship was there. And this was the second year in a row I was working with him at West Oakland Middle School. So he had the pre-existing relationship. He loved the beat making thing. He told me when I came in, he said, I haven't seen him for 2 weeks, and he said, my mother passed away since I last saw you. And I said, I am so sorry to hear that. I can only imagine how difficult that is. I'm a trained therapist. If you want to talk about it, we can. And if you just want to make beats, we can just make beats, right? So I'm not forcing him. I'm giving him choice and autonomy. And you should never force someone to process something traumatic or something they're not ready to talk about before they're ready to talk about it. It's going to just be a really bad experience, and can be really damaging. So he said, yeah, I just want to make beats. And I'm still, as a psychotherapist and a psychoanalytically and psychodynamically oriented therapist, I'm thinking about unconsciously, what is he expressing, playing out, communicating to me through our beat making process? Is this beat maybe a little more aggressive than usual, expressing some anger and some rage? Is it a little bit faster, or is it, and just thinking about the derivative moments, meaning what is he expressing unconsciously through that process about what he's feeling, and how can I help him to kind of contain these difficult feelings, to process them and make sense of them, even if it's nonverbal, even if it's just through the music making process, and being present and caring, and not being overwhelmed and falling apart, but just being able to listen. And I think that's the value that we really offer when we listen to people, and when we can really hold the difficult moments, the stressful things, and people want to just talk and want to be heard and want that reflected. It's so powerful. And so I think I was doing this in a nonverbal way. I had another situation in a school where we were about to start class. Well, it was like 10 minutes before class I arrived. I heard that one of our students who was in our class had been assaulted outside of the school by a parent and had been taken to the hospital. Some of the kids in our class had witnessed this. Almost all the kids in the class knew that it had happened, some more than others. So I made a decision based on my training and what, my best judgment, hopefully, that I would acknowledge what had happened. That I said to the class, and I told my instructors, look, I'm going to tell them if they want to talk about it, they can. If they don't want to, we're going to make music, and we're going to do it in our structured, usual way to kind of, give them some reassurance from grown-ups that it's okay, that there's a structure you can follow despite this crazy, traumatic, violent thing that just happened. And for the kids that are ready to talk about it, we'll have them split into groups, separate from kids who are not, so that the kids who are not being overwhelmed or dysregulated by it if they're not ready to process it. When we broke into groups, I worked with a young man that I had a relationship with. I'd known him for a little bit. And I said to him, would you like to talk about what happened, or would you like to just make beats? He said, I'd like to just make beats. 3, 4, 5 minutes later, he's talking to me about it. We're making the beats as well. And again, the music, I think he's kind of being shaped by his emotional experience, and perhaps a little different than what he usually makes. But he's also talking to me about it. And we got to talking about, why would a grown up do that to a child, get into a fight with a child and physically assault them? And, he's a smart kid, and he's a 7th grader. And he said, she probably has some problems. And, I talked to him, and I said, how do you think that this, woman who assaulted this girl, like, copes with her problems? And what do you think she might be going through? What would lead someone to do that? And trying to just kind of make sense of this really overwhelming, scary, chaotic thing. Now, mind you, halfway through the class, the alarm in the school goes off, and the school goes into lockdown, and they make an announcement because they think the parent has come back, maybe looking for another child or something like that. And so that's further dysregulating and scary to the students. And so I again kind of say to the group, to my instructors and to the kids, okay, look, because the kids start getting kind of riled up, and they say, we're going to go find them and go beat her up, or whatever, right? And I said, no one's going to go beat her up. No one's going to do any of that. I was going to actually have a Freudian slip down, the parents, but the adults here are going to, that's the function that we're serving, right? We're acting kind of as, as step in, responsible adults who care, as the good parents, who are available in the moment to these kids. They say, no, you're going to stay in here. We're going to focus on making music. If you need to talk about this, we can. But, this kid was able to verbally process with me and start to make sense of this really traumatic thing. And to really kind of think about where this would come from. And I think in doing so, you are also inevitably reflecting on your own, psychological experience, and it's a metapsychological thing, thinking about thinking. So I think that we offer a structure, we offer responsible adults who support students, who support young people, offer them an outlet, offer them a healthy relationship, and usually in a continuous manner, usually 12, 15 weeks minimum. Now, that being said, we do one-off workshops, and those one-off workshops can be really transformative, and you can have those eureka moments, or those really profound existential moments when you discover yourself as an artist or as a musician, and create a new kind of sense of this artistic identity, separate from maybe the identity you have built on, it could be on like a lot of stigma, or like, you're not good at school, or or you're a bad kid. And then a child or a person can discover themselves as a artist or a creator, and have this alternative identity or new identity that can really help with perhaps being more forgiving, and kind of help them to heal. But look, the longer the better, the more frequency and duration, longer duration, the better. But I think we can have moments that we don't even know how profound they are for some people. And that happens in therapy. It happens in our lives all the time, when you just do something nice for someone, or do something for someone, you don't even realize perhaps what you're doing really helps them. In the same way that maybe we can do things that we're not aware, maybe hurt people, or make people feel dismissed. I think that there's positive things we do. So my hope is that at the very least, when we do these one-off workshops, we help people to discover themselves, and discover new parts of themselves, and discover new experiences, and to feel understood, accepted, and empowered in a way that they perhaps may not have, or not have that opportunity. And we're going to a school in Philadelphia doing a one-time workshop from New York with my New York staff on Wednesday. And my hope is that these kids are going to have at the very least, a one-time experience that will offer them, some of these potential outcomes.
Yeah. Well, so how have you been? I am hearing transformation all over the place, and I want to get a little messy, a little vulnerable.
Okay.
You get to have boundaries. You don't have to get
it.
What it's like. We don't have to be like vulnerability junkies here to have peeping Toms on your vulnerability. But as much as you want to share, how have you been changed by this work? What have you learned? What has surprised you?
To be honest, I do so much administrative work now.
Yeah.
That I still do direct services, and especially when I travel, but I'm doing a lot more admin and leadership work. And even the past month, 3 weeks have been very trying for me, and have been very difficult from it an administrative HR kind of leadership perspective. And I've really, I've failed many times over recently. I've had some successes too, but I've really been struggling with certain, with certain interpersonal relationships, whether they be with my staff or whether they be with people that I'm interacting with outside of my staff in kind of an interorganizational capacity. And it's really made me reflect on how do I need to change? What are patterns that I'm repeating that are not helpful for me, for my staff, for my organization? And I've my current partner, the woman that I'm dating, works in HR and is a very insightful and very smart, psychologically, emotionally smart person. And she told me something a mentor had told her about this kind of 5-second rule, that to try taking a 5-second pause, particularly when you're in a kind of a contentious situation, to reflect on what you're going to say and how it's going to impact someone, and to not react defensively. Mm-hmm. Now, that's been a really massive struggle for me to do. And
really?
I have not. Yeah. Well, I think, look, it's not that I don't think about what I say. I mean, I like to think I'm a very thoughtful person, and I reflect a lot of myself, but there's certain people who trigger me. There's certain people who are acting things out with me, and certain folks who are being really inflexible and not really, keeping to certain agreements or expectations that I have of them or that organizationally are set out. And, it's been a challenge. And I've really tried to be flexible, but I've also tried to set limits, and there've been a lot of pushback against the limits. And in some situations you need to keep the limits, and some you need to be a little more flexible. And then in certain situations where I'm making asks of people, I feel like, I make a lot of asks, and I always try to repay or balance it. I mean, people are also happy to volunteer because they believe in what we do. But it's really, look, we all have our baggage. We all have our character flaws, myself included. And there's certain times that you need to just not push, and you need to not fall into that trap or whatever that thing is that dysregulates or sets off or triggers that person. And I think that, I've kind of stepped into some booby traps, and I've also kind of let perhaps some of my, personal baggage or shortcomings maybe influence my level of performance or not being the best leader or person that I can be. And so that's something that I've really been trying to do, like personal inventory and reflection on, and attempt to reset, even if I kind of screw up on a daily basis.
If I can offer, I suspect that every person that directs a nonprofit that's listening to us right now just had a big collective out breath and went, oh my gosh, you mean I'm normal?
Yeah.
Because I do believe, I just said to somebody recently, the hardest thing for me about sidewalk talk and leading sidewalk talk has been that when you're in the role of leader, you have a big sign on your head that says, project all your shit onto me.
Bingo. That's it. That's totally it. Because you're the authority figure. You're the parent. You're the controlling, people view you as the one who wants to control them. And it's so true. So you have to be able to hold those projections and not punish people or react too much to it. That's so true. I can really, really, really identify with that, and really relate to
it's more profound. It's really given me a sense of sort of systemic injustice, and that in order for us to really create justice in the world, we just have to humanize everybody, including, like, I think what you're doing, Elliot, by sharing, gosh, this is hard, is you're actually humanizing yourself as a leader rather than remaining unknowable, which I think is part of what keeps us all stuck, because then you just get to be the asshole boss, right?
Yeah.
And now what happens is your students go, yeah, being a leader is not glamorous. It's service, and it's hard, and it can be lonely. And then, the other piece is
that's a great adjective for describing leadership. It can be very lonely.
Oh, it's lonely.
Yeah.
It's super lonely. That's why, for me, I'm very tight with boundaries because I imagine for you, as you do more administrative work, you've got to get back in and make beats with the kids that you're serving because it's the thing that keeps you going, right?
Yeah, and I think even just making music for myself, which is literally what I was doing before we got on the call, and my artistic productivity has drastically
Hmm.
since the administrative has gone up, and it's part of my self care that I've been really bad about is not creating the time for myself to create artistically because I feel so much administrative pressure and have so many things that need to be done
Yeah.
and I lose access to that which I loved, as well as the youth work too. But I think that that's an important thing, and I feel guilty when I take that time for myself or to do the artistic stuff. I feel like I should, as a leader, when you have your own business, you feel like you should always be working, right? And what could I be doing
Yep.
right now, right?
Yeah,
So
I had one of those ass kickings today where I was like, not enough, got to do more, blah, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah. And I'm like,
yeah,
stop that. But bringing it back to that, if there is this pain point, right, where we know that you're making this sacrifice, why do you do it? Like, why does it matter so much to you? Because it clearly has some hard parts of it too. It's not just glee and joy and I'm the cool dude that made this thing. It's hard. You've been hustling a long time, but it matters.
yeah.
Why does it matter so much, Elliot?
I think there's multiple things. Some of them maybe are more selfish or narcissistic, and some of them are profound. Some of it, like I love being able to connect with lots of different folks and lots of different people, and I love being able to travel and experience different cultures. I also love being able to impact my local community and do something where I feel like in a world that can be so cruel and crazy that hopefully I can have an impact both on systemic levels, even if there's smaller levels of systems, although I, do a lot of advocacy work and presenting and training and passing on our model, but also, you know, whether it be like in an individual level, small group level, school, community, etc. Just that despite all the crazy things that are going on in the world and the cruelty and selfishness, that I can share this model and I can motivate people. I think one of my great strengths is motivating people and inspiring people to see that they can have an effect and that beat makers, hip
Mm.
hop artists can go into their own community. So I come into community and I say, here's the model. Yes, you can do this. I know you've been thinking about this or you haven't. Here's how you do it. You got the tools. Here's the permission. Here's the know-how. Here's the model and the structure. So, we started a sister chapter in El Salvador. And we're going to be presenting with them in Mexico at this national or it's international congress on school violence prevention. Now
Mm.
they now are running an autonomous program. We came in, shared the model with them, helped them get donated some of the beat machines, the MIDI controllers, and now we're helping them to get some computers to be able to really sustain it. But they now have gotten contracts and are able to do this work. And as someone who's a United States citizen and with the legacy of political and social interference in what we've done to El Salvador, even creating the gang problem there, I feel a responsibility, and I feel like at least I can do something as an individual and help facilitate this with an organization. I think that's part of it, and the fact that this really is something that I created that is mine, that speaks to me. I'm the son of three psychoanalysts, and there's a little bit of pressure there to be a good therapist. And I think that I needed to find my own path that really spoke to my identity and my passions, which were synthesized, through the combination of music, social justice, hip hop, psychology, mental health, etc. And so it's my thing. And I'm also, as torturous as it can be and scary as it can be, I'm also my own boss. And we answer to grants, we answer to some other partners and institutions. But I think I had a pretty traumatic experience, I think, working in a clinic or working in community mental health clinics
Mm.
that I thought were really toxic environments where I
Mhm.
was I and other interns, I was a postdoc and, and even as an intern, but I felt that there were some very dysfunctional organizations and systems. And aside from all the trauma and the toxicity of that, there was also organizational things set up where I was, I think I took some emotional abuse from from a supervisor who was permitted to be there and who was like harassing not just me, but had a history and a legacy of sexually harassing interns and practicum students, and we was permitted to go on for a while. And I think that plus not, what I believe in isn't being given to the world. Like the traditional mental health system, there's pluses to it, but there's also there's a real lack of cultural responsivity and a lack of imagination and a lack of being flexible and tapped into what's going on. It's kind of like how community colleges are much more tapped into current phenomena and trends and what's going on in industries more so often than these fancy research universities that are tied up in politics. And I think we need to be cutting edge. I don't think there are other hip hop therapy people, there are other hip hop education folks, but I think I wanted to go for something that spoke to me and what I loved and it's part of my identity, and also be able to have an effect on the world and have a life that was meaningful to me and not be on someone else's kind of I don't know how to say it exactly, but live someone else's life or their model, but live mine and develop myself in a way that I think really speaks to kind of an existential purpose.
Yeah. So I just want to make a reflection, and then I'll ask for one wish to our Sidewalk Talk volunteers. But I'm really hearing that this is a reclamation for you from this toxic environment. It's a reclamation not only of the possibility of a mental health environment that could be non-toxic, but one that could be forward-thinking, creative, cutting edge, culturally responsive, and that's made by you, so that your own self-efficacy in the world is lived. And I think
and that's something that I've been working, and that's something that I've been working towards since I graduated high school or college. I knew in college that something like this was what I wanted to do, going and getting a doctorate or a PhD, whatever, in psychology. I knew that I wanted to integrate hip hop education, then later mental health. So this is not like a fly by night or overnight thing. This is something long in the making. That's part of my developmental journey. So I would say so. And that's a pretty nice summary, a reclamation and a reaction perhaps to my wanting autonomy and control and independence and having my own thing.
So we close our conversation with kind of a ritual, I guess, because a lot of our volunteers will actually be listening to our conversation. And so as a way to kind of bring them in and to close our conversation, what advice would you offer or wish would you offer the 7,000 Sidewalk Talk listeners based on the experience that you have in the world, listening to youth and using hip hop? Or as a psychologist, what advice or wish would you offer our listeners?
I think the cliche of just being open and trying not to be too stuck in your ways, in your agenda and what you're used to and what your values are, judgments, and not trying to impose yourself, but being able to listen authentically. Again, I sound kind of like a trope or a cliche here, but I think that's really important. I wish that that everyone can have moments of relaxation and recuperation and healing and self-forgiveness that allows them to like nourish themselves and recharge and be better people. And I wish that for myself too. I'm really trying to still work out the work-life balance and what I need, and trying to respect that for other people. So I think really just trying to be open and listen to what people are saying, and that not even if you're a good listener or a good therapist, we don't always know. We often don't know what people are telling us, and to just kind of honor that experience and be open to new things and things that are not maybe what you're most comfortable with. Just in the way that I hope that people will accept, the therapeutic beat making or hip hop pedagogy or hip hop therapy, and they think, no, that's all bad, or like what I know of this is bad. I know this. Well, be open to it, and I hope that as we mature and get older, we don't lose our openness, that we stay curious.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like a trope or like a cliche. It's very cliche
Well,
to say that.
There's something really subtle that you've said, though, that I'm going to just repeat. You said be open, right? But you also said be open to the unknown, right? And I think there's something cool about that, because it's in the unknown where there's all kinds of creative juices of flowing if we can just let ourselves not need to know sometimes. Well, Elliot, I've taken a ton of your time, and you have such a delicious voice, by the way. I love your voice.
Oh, thank you.
I could just listen to you all day long. You know what I'm sad about, though? I'm sad that we didn't make any beats during this conversation. So maybe you can send me a couple beats that I can post.
You mean like this?
Yeah.
Because I was just working on that before. I'll just play it for you real quick. This is a beat that I was working on. Yeah, I'll play it. We'll break it down from the bare components. So yeah, I just started with a German. It's actually a German. You're in Germany, so I started with a German plug-in synth playing a chord progression. And I put a little effect, a wah-wah effect on it. It was just that.
So are you going to send me that track so that we can we'll
have to.
We'll have to put it in the show. We'll put it in the show notes. Put it down on the. Elliot.
Yes, ma'am.
It was a lovely chat. It was nice to hear your voice. It was great.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for all the work you do in the world. And if you ever are working too hard, call me. I'll set you straight.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me on. And I'm headed. It looks like potentially headed to Europe and Scandinavia, and who knows, maybe even Germany in August. So
I'm coming up to see you.
Hey, come up to Finland.
I have a free place for you to stay if you want to come down this way. So either way.
Yes, please, and thank you.
All right. Thanks, Elliot. Take it easy.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for being here and listening to this episode of the Sidewalk Talk podcast. If you like what you heard, tell your friends, tell your family, like and comment on the podcast publisher that you're listening from, and subscribe. This will help us get the word out about changing our culture to one of connection.